After being deposed in a coup and submitting his resignation, the fight back. Abdurrabbi Mansour Hadi says he's resuming his duties as Yemen's president. Can he make peace with Houthi rebels, or is the country heading for a split? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zaidan. Yemen's political landscape is shifting again as the southern city of Aden becomes the new focus of attention. After being deposed in a coup when Houthi rebels overran his presidential palace, Abdurrabbi Mansour Hadi resigned as president. But now that he's fled the capital, he's withdrawn his resignation and is summoning ministers to join him in Aden, dismissing the actions of Houthi rebels as null and illegitimate. Well, this latest twist in the power struggle will complicate the progress of UN-brokered talks and the recently created People's Transitional Council aimed at guiding the country out of political crisis. To our panel in a moment, but after we hear from Al Jazeera's Mohammed Val in Aden.
This is the Yemeni president in his new seat of power. The southern city of Aden is now his de facto capital. He met more provincial governors from the south on Monday. In the coming days, he is expected to receive the governors of the northern provinces, which declared allegiance to him. It's part of an attempt to reconsolidate his status as the legitimate president of Yemen.
The president is adamant on continuing the political process, which he pledged to the people of Yemen, who voted him into power. The purpose is to implement the transitional tasks and the stipulations of the national dialogue.
On Monday, Hadi sent a letter to the parliament saying he has withdrawn his resignation and he is getting support. The Gulf countries called on the people of Yemen to rally behind him. And within Yemen, his supporters continue to take to the streets in large numbers. The powerful tribes of Bani Hilal in the province of Shabwa paraded their military might in a show of support to Hadi. Major demonstrations have taken place in the city of Taiz against the Houthis and in favor of the president. Protesters urged him to reassume his full powers and expel the Houthis from the capital Sana'a. Thousands marched towards Hadi's residence in the capital to express their solidarity. The Houthis say they have fought for decades to end marginalization. They say they took control of Sana'a as a revolutionary force of change because the government has failed to fix Yemen's problems. But in response to Hadi's growing momentum since his escape, the Houthis began to take more drastic measures. They tried to force the resigned ministers to return to their posts. They threatened to conduct court trials for the ministers who refused. The Houthis also began to crack down further on protesters. This is the funeral of a youth who was killed in the city of Ib in central Yemen when the Houthis opened fire on demonstrators on Sunday. Amnesty International has condemned what it described as increasing instances of killing and torture by the Houthis against unarmed civilians in the last few weeks. President Hadi called on government members to come to Aden, where a new cabinet can be formed, but the Houthis refused. 6 of them, including the Prime Minister, are still under house arrest in Sana'a. Amid this tug of war between the two sides, Yemen risks division and civil war. Mohammed Val, Al Jazeera, Aden.
Let's bring in our guests now. Joining us from London is Mohammed Qubati, a member of Yemen's National Dialogue Conference. In Sana'a, al-Ghani al-Iryani, Vice President of the Khubara Center, a local think tank that focuses on economic and development issues. And in New York, we have Peter Salisbury, a former consultant on Yemen for Chatham House. Good to have you with us. If I could start with Abdul-Ghani. According to the Constitution, according to the rules, does Yemen still have a president?
Of course it does. To start with, the resignation was never officially delivered to the parliament. The parliament never reviewed it and never voted on it. And first of all, it was signed under duress. The president had been under attack. 3 members of his family had been killed. His house had been demolished. So any resignation that he signs under these conditions is meaningless.
Peter, though, what if the Houthis force Parliament to convene and accept the resignation letter that was issued in the first place? What happens then?
That's a good question. I think the problem at the moment is that even if the Houthis were to force a vote in Parliament, Hadi has now officially rescinded his resignation, and under the existing constitution, that means that his letter of resignation is no longer valid. So he remains technically the president. He hasn't submitted his resignation technically because he has taken it away already. So it's too late for the Houthis to do that.
Mohammed, what is Abdul Hadi trying to do right now to put his administration back together in Aden and areas which the Houthis don't control?
If I may just point out first to the issue of the resignation. You know, the parliament has not discussed it within a month, so it's automatically it falters. That's one point. The other point, I think the president is now back. He's in the helm and he's going to run the country. He's the legitimate leader of the country.
But he can't run the country when he doesn't control the country. That is a challenge, is it not, Mohammed?
Yes, Sami, but he controls at least 2/3 of the country. You've got 4 of these 6 regions which we have agreed in the dialogue conference to form a new federation of Yemen. 4 of them are under his control. A 5th one is half under his control, half under the control of Ali Abdullah Saleh. And the Houthis are only in control of one region practically, which is mostly the Zaydi, the one which has got their constituency among the Zaydi sect. And I'm worried that this whole confrontation is building up to take a sort of a sectarian dimension, which is quite worrying, I think, for everybody in Yemen, because we have lived together, Sunnis and Zaydis, without any such problems in the past. And I think the president now being sided with most, as in your report is that appeared, the tribes in Shabwa, both Bani Hilal, the Awlaqi tribe, in Lahj, the Yafi'i tribe, as well in the northern parts, previous of North Yemen.
Right,
Taiz, there was
sorry to interrupt you,
national
Mohammed,
conference.
of course the Houthis do control the capital, though, don't they? They obviously control parts in the north and even parts in the south. A huge challenge. Perhaps, Peter, can he put his administration back together logically, you know, thinking through this logically, when he calls on his ministers to come to Aden and his ministers apparently still under house arrest in Sana'a? I mean, how do you put a government back together when they're under house arrest?
Yes, I think there are a number of issues at play here. First and foremost, there's this discussion of various groups in parts of the country not under Houthi control rejecting the Houthis and at the same time affirming Hadi as the president of Yemen. But they're largely doing so not because they feel any need to support Hadi, but because they see him as a figure to rally around in terms of opposition to the Houthis. In terms of forming a government, it would be largely symbolic. The levers of power in Yemen, the day-to-day running of the government has always been done centrally, has always been done from Sana'a, and the Houthis will control the money, most importantly. They will control the central bank and the Ministry of Finance, which means that Hadi, unless he's getting external resources, won't really be able to finance any government he forms. So he will, in effect, be a president in exile and be forming a government in exile, although within his own country.
Interesting point about the money. We'll pick up on it there, but you mentioned centrally controlled, and the latest developments, of course, serving only to highlight the further division between north and south in Yemen. Houthi rebels have emerged as the dominant political force, sweeping down from the north to overrun the capital Sana'a unopposed in September. And as we've said, Abdurrabb Mansour Hadi is regrouping in his hometown of Aden, which of course was the capital of South Yemen before unification with the north in 1990. But the crisis extends beyond Yemen's borders. Gulf nations are backing Hadi's attempt to reassert himself as the legitimate president, while the Houthis are widely believed to be backed by Iran. Abdul Ghani, what do you think is his long-term strategy, is Abdul Hadi's long-term strategy here? Assuming he gets to a point where he feels he's reinstated what he can of his administration, is the next step then, let's talk to the Houthis, or does he get enough global or regional backing to try and take the north by force again?
Actually, he does have the regional, at least the regional support to present greater opposition to al-Houthi control. But he has been very clear in his first statement that his objective is to go back to the dialogue, to go back to the outcomes of the national dialogue and to further discussion with the Houthis and other forces in a neutral ground so that a national consensus could be built. That's his objective.
Al-Iryani, forgive me for interrupting you, but why would it work this time? It hasn't worked before. He apparently didn't have enough of support from any armed force to help him when he was in Sana'a. Why would he be in a stronger negotiating position now?
Unfortunately, when his house and his family were attacked by al-Houthi, there was a clear division of the forces between forces that come from the south and forces that come from the north. And unfortunately, the northern soldiers did not defend the supreme commander of the armed forces and the president of the country. They chose to watch as al-Houthi attacked the president and killed members of his family. So I think that being in that environment where the polarization was taking place in terms of Zaidi, non-Zaidi, south, north, it was difficult for a southern president to exercise his authority. I think he will be in a much better position based in Aden.
This is interesting. It's interesting that you used the word polarization. Mohammed, do we have a split between two camps or more? I mean, if we had a situation where even some of the northern forces, some of whom were not sympathetic towards the Houthis but didn't want to help Abdul Hadi because he's from the south, it really begs the question, how many polarizations do we have? How many polar points do we have in the struggle here?
I think the major one, Sami, is what we have, me and Abdul Ghani has alluded to, is the Zaidi, non-Zaidi sort of split here. As far as we can collect now, the most Sunni population is rallying around Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi as a figure to oppose the sectarian aspect of this confrontation. But there is another polarization which we shouldn't forget, is the north-south polarization. If Hadi is now there, and he's now trying actually to follow, as Abdul Ghani has mentioned, the resolutions of the United Nations Security Council resolution, whether the last one, 2201, or the former one, which I think tomorrow is going to be again on the table, 2140, which was issued under Chapter 7. So I think with that in hand, Abdurrabbu Mansour is expecting a lot of support from the international community and from the regional community. And I hope they don't treat him. He has pinned his hope on them. He will feel to be let down. Then I think the Southerners will be moving as a camp towards regaining their status as a former Republic of South Yemen or the Democratic Republic of South Yemen. So we've got a split here of, first Zaidi, non-Zaidi, and then southern and northern camps of the former two states of Yemen.
Well, Peter, even in terms of the Zaidi, non-Zaidi, how much cohesion is there, aside of the north-south split, amongst the non-Zaidis? Where do the Sunni tribes stand? What about Islah Party members? Al-Qaeda has a very strong presence. Do we know how much cohesion there is between all of these parties, which are broadly termed as non-Zaidi actors?
Well, that's a very good point. And what Mohammed just spoke about was a slightly separate issue, which is the desire of a large proportion of Southerners for independence from the unified state. Now, the issue that Hadi is going to have as presenting himself as the leader of a unified effort against the Houthis is that he's still calling for maintenance of unity, and it's quite difficult to see how his support will be maintained in the long term if his main base is people who actually want something fundamentally different in the future from what he wants. Then we have tribes that are from the north, so there are northern areas that are predominantly Sunni, predominantly Shafi'i, so the areas of Al-Jawf and Marib in particular, where there's very strong opposition to the Houthis, but where the tribes are unlikely to have a particularly strong stance either way on independence of the south. Then you have the issue of Al-Qaeda. Will we see al-Qaeda becoming tangentially connected with this effort against the Houthis? And will any support for a divided group that is fighting against the Houthi come to mean support for the local al-Qaeda franchise? So it's deeply complex. And within the South itself, there are many divisions. So there are areas of the South that would be quite happy to be separate from the rest of the country, so Hadramaut to the east. And as Mohammed can speak to, there are people from Aden, from the port town where Hadi is right now, who would like to see Aden separate itself. So Hadi will be able to build a coalition of support as long as it's in opposition to the Houthis. But in terms of being able to maintain coherence within that coalition, it's really questionable how durable such an alliance would be.
Interesting point. Let me briefly, Mohammed, then, what would Abdul Hadi have to do to keep the Southerners happy and on board without risking some kind of confrontation with their aspirations for secession?
I think with him now in Aden, he has got to get to engage them, so that with the promise that we'll try, when we were in the National Dialogue Conference, our brothers from the South, a group of us who have joined the National Dialogue Conference, and when they were, saying that we are traitors to the cause. But we told them, no, let's try this. Let's, go and see and call the bluff of these people. Are there actually, reasonably would agree to building a new federal state? If they don't build it, then we'll go back. So I think Hadi has got to play that card and engage them and say, let's put them to the test again, call their bluff. If these people in the north are actually, serious about building a federation which is built on a law of state and order and civic values, then we go. But we know, and most of the Southerners feel, that this is actually a game. The Houthis have been against the idea of building a federal state, as well as the former President Saleh and his forces. Mohammed, they don't want a federation.
How would you respond then to the Houthi sentiment that says that they're not against building a federal state, but they've repeatedly been marginalized, let down, and promises unfulfilled?
Well, that's what they have said, Sami, but when we go back, you will see that actually they have explicitly, been against the federation and building of a federation and building of a new, state built on law and order and a civic modern state. I mean, everybody knows that. If you look at the way they look, and the way they are treating people, I mean, they have been in Saada, and I think Peter at one time, he reported that these people have not allowed, songs and music in Saada. How they are going to move towards building a modern, free, Yemeni democratic state and federal state?
Abdul Ghani, there is an interesting question here while we're looking at all the actors. We haven't talked about the former president, Ali Abdullah Saleh, and his party. What stance are they taking? Because, the leaks indicated they were very much allies with the Houthis, but now you've got the General People's Congress Party saying they're not going to try and force Parliament to vote on the resignation or accepting the resignation of Hadi. Is there some split going on within their ranks?
Of course there is. You see, they are competing for leadership of the Zaydi demographic. Saleh was the leader of the Zaydi demographic until he had problems with his allies, al-Ahmars and the commanders and so on. And the Zaydi elite fractured, and that led to the change that started taking place in 2011. Since then, Saleh has been trying to unify the Zaydi elite, but he has failed. Al-Houthi came from Saada and forcibly unified that Zaydi elite, and Saleh assisted him all the way since 2011 in playing that role. However, Saleh killed members of Al-Houthi family, and they are bent on revenge, and I think he is going to try to prevent them from taking.
Hang on, how do we know that Ali Abdullah Saleh killed members of the Zaydi elite and family members?
Well, he was the president who gave orders to kill Hussein al-Houthi, the founder of al-Houthi movement, the brother of the current leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi. He also went after their father, Badr al-Din al-Houthi, until Badr al-Din al-Houthi died in hiding, probably due to lack of medical care. And and of course, there are many others who died.
People may
in the
blame
fighting,
him, but of course it hasn't been
family.
established in a court that he personally killed any members of the Houthi ruling family elite, has it? Just to give ourselves on good legal ground here.
No, but al-Houthis are officially blaming him for those murders, and they continue to say that they are going to take revenge.
Cool. Let's bring in Peter, because I think we've just got a few minutes here. What about the United Nations? They've had months of negotiation and mediation efforts. Now they seem relatively silent. Do you think the UN is putting something together, or are they scratching their heads on this conundrum, thinking, what on earth are we going to do next?
Well, I think the UN is in a very difficult position right now. The UN Special Envoy to Yemen, Jamal Ben Omar, has been in Sana'a for, I think, the better part of 2 months right now, trying to find a resolution to this crisis, this latest crisis that was sparked by the Houthis taking control of the presidential palace, taking control of Hadi's residence, and effectively provoking him into resigning. And the problem for Ben Omar and the UN is that they have been trying to establish an agreement between the major political forces in Yemen, but realistically the north of Yemen, for a power-sharing deal that wouldn't include Hadi, that would basically mean Hadi being allowed to step down. Now we have an issue where he is trying to manage this one process and prevent the outbreak of conflict in the north, but at the same time, Hadi is calling for a completely new track of negotiations. And I think the issue from the UN's perspective will be, how do we maintain some form of stability, some form of peace, while trying to create some sort of consensus? And the biggest problem in Yemen at the moment is that consensus is effectively impossible to broker. The major political parties, the major political powers have proven time and time again that they have very little interest in working together for the collective good.
Right.
In general, they're seeking personal gain and gain for their group, but they're not really interested in finding a lasting solution, be it the Houthis, be it Islah, be it Saleh and the GPC. All
right, we've got about 60 seconds. So very briefly, Mohammed, what about the money? Peter made a good point earlier on. Most of the resources and money controlled by the Houthis. Is Abdul Hadi going to get enough international support, money perhaps otherwise, to be able to make a good stand?
I think our brothers in the GCC area, we've got a branch of the central bank in Aden, and easily I think they could feed some for the at least maintaining the rest of the budget for this year for the areas which are going to be siding with Abdurrabba Mansour Hadi.
And no doubt there's plenty more to discuss, and we could go on this one, but I have a feeling we'll be back anyway to talk about this before not too long. Let's thank our guests now at this point, though, for their contributions in the show. From London, Mohammed Qubati; from Sana'a, Abdul Ghani al-Iryani; and from New York, Peter Salisbury. And thank you for joining us. If you've got anything you'd like to add, you can head over to our programme page at aljazeera.com. You can post your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or send your tweets to @AJ Inside Story. I'm Sami Zaidan from the whole team. For now, it's goodbye.